both Deforchon and Stodels are misrepresenting me. Now, as far as I can tell from the past few videos, Deforchon does want to reduce this issue to a matter purely of semantics and language. And I left some comments, quite a few comments, trying to correct him on this because it's misleading. The point I made was one could grant one's opponent's definition of their terms and still then proceed to draw out reductio ad absurdums and contradictions from their own definitions. That's what I was talking about in my video. It's not just a semantic issue. One could easily point out that if you have two terms by your opponent's own definitions, they nonetheless still contradict each other, or the logical result of applying your opponent's principles leads to something that undermines another principle. And so it's misleading to break this down as if it's purely a matter of semantics, when it's a question of ideas, and when we start getting into specifics, that's what's being talked about. It's not just a semantic issue. That is misleading. Because, like for example, he uses capitalism as an example, and he says that he means private ownership of the means of production. And even upon establishing that capitalism means private ownership of the means of production, I could still continue begging questions. I could then go on to ask you to define private ownership of the means of production. And I could argue that the content of your particular definition of private ownership of the means of production actually does devolve into a state with me granting your own definitions. It's not just me nitpicking with your definitions, it's the actual content of the specific ideas in question. So it seems to me that what Deforchon is doing is completely eliminating specifics from this matter. But he's obfuscating the issue by claiming that it's only about words when it's not. What's in contention is the specific ideas or principles that people hold if they create cognitive dissonance or contradict each other, even assuming their own definitions of terms. So it's not the fact that someone calls themselves an anarcho-capitalist that I would argue against. It's the substantive content of a particular person who does call themselves an anarcho-capitalist. And I give an example that I've actually run into with quite a few people who do call themselves anarcho-capitalists. Someone may advocate individual ownership over an entire city. I give him this example. The city government sells itself to the highest bidder. I don't need to play a semantic game to argue against this. All I need to point out is that a single person owning a city grants them absolute decision-making power over those who live within it, and that the property title transfer is not voluntary relative to residents. As such, this privately owned city, if you want to call it that, is a monarchical city-state. The reasoning behind this argument has nothing to do with semantics over definitions. It has to do with a specific idea being advocated and drawing out the consequences of that idea, and pointing out that the consequences of that idea actually undermines the core purpose or principle involved in the anarchism. So in the example, I don't accuse an anarchist of secretly being in league with the state. I accuse someone with a specific idea, in this case individually owned cities, of having an idea that inherently devolves into or constitutes a state. To completely ignore the substance of my actual argument for why this is frankly bullshit. And so Deforchon tends to deceptively misframe the issue. Deforchon and Stodels both keep trying to insinuate that I'm trying to claim a monopoly on anarchism, that you have to abide by literally every single thing that I prefer in order to be an anarchist. And that's not the point. That's totally missing the point. Upon arguing that you can't join anarchism with literally anything, it's a non sequitur to conclude from that I'm saying that you must believe exactly what I believe, down to the last detail, to be an anarchist. Or that you must abide by a certain system to be an anarchist. No, that's not my point. My point has to do with principles prior to even having a question of systems. And they would like to construe themselves as being pluralists here, but the only point I'm making is that the pluralism isn't completely arbitrary. This shouldn't be a controversial point at all. When I say that anarchism can't be joined with literally anything, that should be obvious. The mere fact that anarchism can be, if anarchism is to be distinguished from anything else at all, that means that it can't literally be joined with anything. If it has a distinct definition, then it can't be literally join with any principle whatsoever if those particular principles actually undermine or contradict it. So to pretend that anarchism is something that is joinable to literally anything, that is to actually destroy the entire meaning of anarchism, because you can't distinguish it from anything else. For some mysterious reason, Stodels accuses me of denying that anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-syndicalism are anarchism altogether. He essentially seems to accuse me of saying that, by definition, something like anarcho-syndicalism is an anarchism. I've never made such an argument at all. What I might have done at various points is pointed out specific principles that might be held by certain anarcho-syndicalists, or certain ideas, specific ideas held by anarcho-syndicalists, and made a query into some tension that certain ideas might create, like the idea of a global federation of unions. It might be possible for a global federation of unions to be compatible with anarchism, but we need to get into the specifics of the matter about how this global federation of unions is really set up. And so in the past, I have made certain criticisms of at least certain ideas that certain anarcho-syndicalists have, about concerns I have about about them possibly being authoritarian in the consequences of certain ideas. That doesn't mean I'm completely brushing off the entire school of anarcho-syndicalism, no. Deforchon and Stodels appear to have confused anarchist pluralism with a total indifference to ideas, basically, a total indifference to specifics. Because their point is dropping context and dropping specifics, which is what the whole thing is about. To pretend that the conflicts that are internal to anarchism are completely semantic is misleading. Now, there is a degree to which the conflicts are semantic. That's fully granted. But to act as if, to just totally be indifferent to the fact that there actually are specific ideas, when we start getting into specifics, there are specific ideas that certain people hold who do label themselves anarchists that conflict with each other. And some of these ideas irreconcilably conflict with each other. And to simply ignore such conflicts and say that all of it is de facto compatible is to completely drop any meaningful query into those ideas and their implications. And that's what I don't understand. I'm making a point to a degree about the important, effective ideas on the world. And to act as if to completely ignore that seems naive to me. And when I make a point about preconditions for a free society, I think that's an important query to make, or preconditions for an unfree society. Ideas have consequences in the real world. And so to act like anarchism could be happily joined to any set of ideas, regardless of the consequences of those ideas, is frankly totally suicidal for the cause of anarchism. If a society has a whole bunch of ideas, a certain set of ideas that are dominant in that society, there are certain ideas that historically and just logically tend to at least lead towards authoritarianism. And to act as if ideas is in the conflict between ideas is completely irrelevant is to nullify the whole point of this, basically. To accuse me of being some kind of intolerant bigot for pointing things like this out and trying to create a substantive consensus by which we can have a meaningful anarchism without adjectives, without it falling apart into total absurdity, I think is bullshit. Their accusation against me is especially mystifying because my role as a left libertarian has primarily been a reconciliation between ideas, a reconciliation between market and social anarchism, a reconciliation between free market ideas and more mutual aid-based ideas. So how you could accuse me, one of the resident left libertarians of YouTube, of being some kind of archon of anarchism, or claiming a monopoly on anarchism, when half of my role has been to try to reconcile and bring together social and market anarchism is mystifying to me.